Welcome to The Archive Speaks, a podcast from the Refugee Archive. In this series, we document the journeys of refugee women who lead households, rebuild communities, and carry stories that often go unheard. These oral histories reflect the personal memories and truths of those who tell them, shaped by time, trauma, and resilience. The Refugee Archive holds space for these voices, without political alignment or editorial interference. This episode introduces Noor, a Palestinian refugee female head of household. In this four-part series, we begin in Gaza, a place most of the world only encounters through headlines. Numbers get debated. Words like war or genocide carry weight, each one pulling us into political arguments. But those arguments can blur out the people living inside this tragedy. Here, we pause to listen to a perspective we rarely hear: women who lead households alone. In conflict zones, it's often women who hold families together, who make survival possible, even while carrying their own grief. In the language of aid and policy, they're called female head of households. In real life, they're mothers, daughters, sisters. Noor is one of them. Her story is not about political labels, but of a woman who lost her home and had to keep moving forward, even with a child in her arms.
Hi, I'm Noor. I was born in Gaza in 1996, a small coastal strip of land along the Mediterranean Sea. Gaza is often in the news, but it's rarely understood. It's not the whole of Palestine. Palestine includes the West Bank, Jerusalem, and all land between the river and the sea. I was born into a big, vibrant Palestinian family. We were 8 in all. My father, a well-known locksmith who worked with his hands. My mother, who held us all together. My 2 old sisters, who I looked up to, and my 3 younger brothers. I was raised by people who had lost everything once, but gave us everything they could. I grew up surrounded by cousins, aunts, uncles, and my beloved grandmother. We lived in a large family building built on land my late grandfather had purchased before even my father was born. My father, who had studied engineering and earned a diploma, actually drew the original blueprints himself. He and my uncles then built the house together with their own hands. That building, it was a legacy, a labor of love, passed from one generation to the next. Our home was one apartment filled with family, my uncles and their kids, my grandmother, my own brothers and sisters. Each of my uncles and my family had their own spacious 3-bedroom apartment, and we shared one enormous front yard, but it was our apartment that always felt like the heart of the action. My dad made sure of that. We were the first family on the block to get a TV, and soon after, we had a Nintendo Atari with Super Mario, every kid's dream. Friends and cousins would flock to our home just to play. My father bought us a huge desktop computer long before anyone else we knew had one. It was bulky, loud, and absolutely magical. In the yard, we lived our childhood to the fullest. We played Almeida, hide and seek, حجرة ورقة مقص, rock, paper, scissors, بيتي بيوت, nas, and every sport we could, like football, basketball, and volleyball. There was always moments, like movements, always laughter. Those games weren't just fun. They were part of how we bonded, like how we learned to share, to lead, to laugh. Our home was always full of warmth, not just in feeling, but in ritual. Every evening when Baba came home from the shop, we would rush to greet him. Baba, Baba! And every single time he lit up like it was the best day, it was the best part of his day. That joy of being wanted, missed, and loved was something my parents gave us freely. And we lived right in front of the sea. That meant summer mornings began before sunrise, right into our parents' room around 6 a.m., shaking my father awake and begging him to take us swimming. Those beach mornings are etched into my memory. The salty breeze, Baba watching over us with his arms crossed and a proud smile on his face. Our neighborhood was alive in every sense of the word. We lived, as I said, across the street from the beach, and the sound of the beach, the beach waves crashing against the shore was the background music of my childhood. Every night and every morning, the sea was there. Its scent in the air, right in front of our house, was the famous Shalihat resort. People came from all over Gaza to enjoy the view we woke up to every single day. It wasn't just the scenery that made it special, it was also the people. Our neighbors weren't just neighbors, they were family friends. Their kids were our playmates. They'd visit often, bringing sweets, and the boundaries between our homes blurred. We were part of a community that looked out for each other, celebrated together. My father had his this beautiful habit. Every other day, he'd pile us up into our car and take us somewhere special, sometimes to the port, Elmina, where we'd watch the boats gently rocking and our feet dangling over the edge. My dad would buy us ice cream, and we'd giggle as we feed them to the fish swimming. Those felt like magic, like the world had just paused just for us. Other times, we'd head to Al Azhar Park to meet up with relatives surrounded by greenery and the sounds of children playing. He never came home empty handed. There were always small treats, new stories, spontaneous plans. And even when we weren't with him, when he went to a feast, a wedding, or a family gathering, he never forgot us. He would always bring something back, the same sweets, the same food, the same joy he had experienced. It was his way of saying, "You were with me in my heart." There was also another part of my father's life that still amazes me till this very day. He was also a beekeeper. Right. We had beehives right in our front yard, and later he moved them to another piece of land. I got stung once, twice, or three times, and I still remember the pain, but also the odd, beautiful sense of connection it gave me. It made me feel rooted to something ancient, something sweet and wild and real, just like him. There was also something sacred about the time we spent with my grandmother. My father made sure that each of us, especially the girls, took turns staying overnight in her apartment. Now tell me why the girls? Because we were a little bit older than, the boys. She made delicious meals just for us, braided our hair, told us stories, and passed down history. The one I remember most is how she was forced to leave her village, Al-Masmiyya al-Kbira, during the Nakba. And she described that night her family left their home thinking it would be for just a few days. They never returned.
Since 1948, when hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were displaced during the Nakba, Gaza became home to many families carrying the keys and memories of villages they could no longer return to. The Nakba, or catastrophe in Arabic, refers to the mass displacement of Palestinians in 1948 during the Arab-Israeli War, marked each year on May 15th as Nakba Day. It is a day of remembrance for that displacement before and after Israel's creation.
Until the day she died, she still believed, truly believed, she would go back. That hope never left her. And because of that, it never left us either. That's where I first learned what it meant to be Palestinian. It's not just a place on a map, it's a thread that connects generations. It's my grandmother's voice shaking when she tells me about like the key that is still hanging in her living room. That's her parents' house in Al-Masmiyya. It's my father taking us to the sea to remind us that we're free in spirit, even when the world tries to cage us. Being Palestinian meant everything in our household. It meant belonging to something bigger than yourself, to a story of resilience, faith, and love for the land and for each other. My family never hid our story. They honored it. They lived it. They passed it down through stories, through rituals, and through the way we loved.
When Noor recalls her childhood, she is remembering a Gaza shaped by the Second Intifada, commonly referred to by Palestinians as Al-Aqsa Intifada, which began in 2000. During these years, incursions and curfews deeply affected daily life of families like Noor's, whose only business gravitate inside their compound. Yet childhood still carried the rhythms of school, food, games, and family. In this section, Noor brings us into her neighborhood by the sea, where joy and community life existed, side by side with fear.
Now, a typical day while I was a child would begin with my mom helping us get ready for school. She'd tie our hair, pack our bags, and always make sure we had everything we needed. My dad, ever this soft-hearted one, would often drive us to school, even though it was just around the corner. We would usually walk to it, but still, it was his way of showing love. I loved school and I loved my parents as well. And I did incredibly well. I was a straight A student, the kind everyone looked to and said, I want to be like her. And then my favorite part of the day, coming home. As soon as I stepped into the building and started climbing the stairs, the smell of home would wrap around me. From the first floor, I could smell the delicious Palestinian food my mother was cooking with love. She always made sure that lunch was ready the moment we walked through the door. مقلوبة, فتة, بازلة, محشي. Each dish carried the warmth of her hands and the history of our people. That aroma rising up told me everything was okay. Everything was in its place. Now, for school, my favorite subjects were always math and English. Numbers made sense to me, and words gave me power. I still remember my English and math teachers. They saw something in me and nurtured it. And there was one Arabic teacher whose words I will never forget. When a staff member at school once mocked me for saying, I want to be a teacher, she stood up and said, she will be, and I know she will. That moment stayed with me. It planted a seed of belief that grew into the career I eventually chose, an English teacher. Even in the best childhoods, there are moments of fear. In Gaza, fear came in waves too, like the sea. We grew up knowing that our safety wasn't guaranteed, that war could arrive with no warnings. But in that apartment, with cousins and computers, the smell of my mom's food, I felt a little bit safe. My childhood people might say that it was a paradox where the joy existed next to uncertainty. Between the years 2000 and 2004, from the time I was 4 until I turned 8, Gaza witnessed a series of invasions, اجتياحات, by the Israeli military. They called them operations, but we Palestinians knew them as what they truly were, invasions. During these years, whenever things escalated, my parents would quietly decide to take us to my grandparents' house on Al-Nasr Street, a neighborhood they believed that would be safer. Sometimes in the middle of the night, they would wake us up, wrap us in blankets, and take us there without ever letting us feel the fear they might or they must have been carrying in their hearts. And there is even one time when they rented an entire separate apartment so we could temporarily move out of our home. While we were sent to play at our grandparents' house, They packed up our belongings and moved them into the new place without ever realizing what was happening. Like, we never knew what was going on. We were kids, we were playing at our grandparents without knowing what truly was happening. They didn't want us to carry the feeling of displacement, to know what it means to be uprooted, even though we were. We were lucky we had parents who did everything to make us, to make fear invisible, to shield us with love. I later learned that while our cousins were helping their parents pack, we were protected from it all. My father and my mother carried the weight of those moments on their shoulders.
Education has always held a special meaning in everyone. For people in conflict, it's a pathway to hope and survival in uncertain circumstances. For Noor, it's a bridge, a way to learn, to speak beyond the borders of your world, and to tell your story, just like she's doing here today. Little did she know, it will hold greater significance in the future. A chance to uproot themselves from silence, to connect, to advocate. Noor's path in that sense isn't just her own, it's what we need more of in every community.
As per my education, I think I first realized I enjoyed learning when I was a very, very young, maybe like around 8 or 9. I was always curious and loved reading anything I could get my hands on. But it was when I started learning English in school that something really clicked. I remember being fascinated by the language, the sounds, the structure, how different it felt from Arabic. I was lucky to have a family that valued education deeply. My parents always encouraged me to study, especially my father. He believed that girls should be just as educated and empowered as boys. And he pushed me to finish my education before considering marriage. That's why I completed the 12 years of school in Gaza. That included 6 years of elementary school, 3 years of middle school, and 2 years of high school. And then came one of the most important years of my life, Tawjihi. Now, Tawjihi is the final year of school in Palestine, and it's the one that determines what you're allowed to study in a university. It's kind of a huge deal. It carries a lot of pressure and a lot of expectations. I already knew I wanted to be a teacher, but I was torn between two paths, English or maths. It was my dad and mom who helped me make that choice. They know how passionate I was about English. They had seen me watching English songs, movies, series, just to learn the language better. I was fascinated by the culture behind the language, the music, the accents, the humor. They also knew how strong I was academically. My English grades were always excellent, even during family gatherings, when my uncles and aunts would throw random trivia questions like, "What's the English word for?" I would be the one to jump in and answer. I also remember when one of my cousins came to visit us from America. She didn't speak Arabic well, so I would be the one sitting with her, talking in English, helping my family understand what she was saying. That really boosted my confidence and showed me how powerful language could be. Eventually, I decided to study English language and teaching methods at Al-Azhar University in Gaza. So those years weren't easy. The situation actually around us was always unstable. Electricity cuts, frequent airstrikes, and a constant sense of fear made it harder for us to focus. But I was determined. I worked hard and graduated with a bachelor's degree. Later on, I earned additional certificate for English language and teaching methods. For me, education has never been just a path to employment. It has always been a way to survive, to grow, and to stay hopeful. In 2008, I was in middle school. I came back from school like it was just a normal day. I asked two of my younger brothers to go out and buy me something, and they happily agreed. And I was over the roof that they went and, they're going to buy me the thing that I want, a snack. You know, just minutes later, the bombing started. We had no idea if they had survived. I remember being frozen with fear, feeling like it was all my fault. It turned out that a neighbor had seen them in the street and pulled them to safety, just 100 feet away from the bombed area. The explosion filled the neighborhood with thick white dust. We couldn't see anything. We were hysterical. And I even just imagined that just, a kid in middle school thinking that she was the reason behind her brothers being in that situation. That wasn't easy at all. Even though everyone around was telling me, like, calm down, it's not your fault. Let's wait till we see what's happened. Where are they? But still, it wasn't easy at all. My uncle rushed out to look for them. We hadn't known that our neighbor kind of saved them. My uncle rushed out to look for them. And after what it felt like an eternity, maybe 10 minutes later, it felt like eternity, believe me. He came back holding them. They were alive. We were very lucky. So many others weren't. And not just to think about 2008, there's 2014 when I received my Tawjihi results. As I said, Tawjihi is a very important year in every Palestinian life. And you need to get, you need to get like higher scores so that you would choose whatever you need to study at university. I couldn't celebrate. I got a very good, you know, result, score, but it was in the middle of a war. My family had been awake all night. We were too, because of the bombing around us. There was no joy, no laughter, no sweets, no singing, just fear. Even my success had to be swallowed quietly while we listened to the news and counted the airstrikes. Now, after graduating from university, I began my journey as an English teacher, working in educational centers and private schools across Gaza, including one of the most respected institution, the American International School. Over the years, I taught learners of all ages, children just starting from to form sentences, teenagers preparing for exams, and motivated adults hoping to improve their careers to communicate with the world. Each classroom brought its own rhythm and challenge. But what connected them all was the joy I felt in helping, students grow, especially in speaking and writing. I wanted my students to feel that English wasn't just a subject to memorize. It was a tool for expression, opportunity, and connection. Beyond Gaza, I also started working with international platforms like Privly and Natakallam, which also allowed me to teach students from different countries and cultures. Through these virtual classrooms, I found myself not only sharing the language I know, but also representing Palestinian identity, resilience, and culture. Teaching kind of became more than a profession for me. It became a bridge, a way for me to tell my story, to break the stereotypes.
Womanhood wears many faces. In one place, it might mean independence. In another, responsibility. In another, faith. Each face carries its own expectations and meanings. Noor speaks of hers with love. The hijab, the guidance of her mother and sisters, the balance between duty and pride. For her, these things aren't limits, they're roots.
The transition from childhood to womanhood in Gaza isn't marked by a single moment. It's something that unfolds slowly, almost like it's literally slowly, until one day you realize you've crossed into a new way of being. There are no official ceremonies, but there are subtle shifts in the way people speak to you, in the responsibilities you carry, and in how the world begins to expect more from you. I began to feel like the transition around the age 12 or 13. It started to feel a little measured. All these things wasn't like when people kind of came across starting to say a girl should begin to carry herself with grace and awareness that wasn't judgmental. It was part of our cultural rhythm, a way of slowly preparing us for strength, for dignity, and what is expected of women. One of the most and beautiful parts of that transition was putting on the hijab. In our Islamic culture, wearing the hijab is both a spiritual and emotional milestone. It marks not just, the physical maturity, but an inward choice to carry faith and identity with pride. I was so excited when that time came. I couldn't wait to try different fabrics, styles, and colors. I remember my mom even took me shopping just for that. We picked out hijabs in soft cottons, silks, light pinks, floral prints, and, some white ones for school. She wanted me to feel beautiful, confident, and proud. And even my sisters were right there with me, opening their drawers, pulling out their favorite hijabs, showing me how to wrap them in different styles. It felt like a rite of passage, but it was warm, joyful, and filled with sisterhood. I remember everyone in the family cheering me on when I first wore it. And even before that, as a little girl, I would take my mother's hijabs and wrap it clumsily around my head, pretending to be her. I couldn't wait for the day I would wear it for real. These days, it become common in Gaza and beyond for families to celebrate a girl's decision to wear the hijab with a small party or family gathering, filled with encouragement and love. It's kind of a way of honoring the skip, not just as a duty, but as a proud choice rooted in faith and identity. I didn't have that, but in a way, I could say that my family and my relatives kind of rooted me up, or let's say encouraged me so much that it felt like it was a party. My mother never sat down with me for one big talk. We don't have those in the Arab world. She led by example. She taught me what womanhood looked like with the way she lived. When she brushed my hair or adjusted my hijab in the mirror, it felt like she was passing something sacred to me. Even as a young girl, you learn duty early. You're expected to help, to protect your family's name, to carry yourself with self respect. But in my home, there was always a balance. I was reminded that my mind and my voice mattered just as much. My parents encouraged me not toward early marriage, but toward purpose, independence, and strength rooted in faith. Looking back, I realized I stepped into womanhood gradually through the prayers by my mother, my sisters teaching me how to wrap a scarf, the responsibility I learned through small acts of care, and the love I saw daily between my parents. That's the Gaza I grew up in.
For Noor, culture and faith were not restrictions, and it reminds us that what it means to be a woman is layered, not one-dimensional, never simple. In Noor's case, those layers come together in a story where being Palestinian, being Muslim, and being a woman all intertwine into strength. And just as womanhood is layered, so too are her feelings about displacement. For Noor, it isn't about politics or alignment. It's about losing the land her family had called home for generations.
My father and my mother tried their best to hide what's happening for our safety. So we wouldn't really understanding what was happening, like politically wise. The only thing I want to say is that we knew that there was a war happening, that some people were being killed, were being murdered. And we knew that there are a lot of houses being demolished. And that's the thing that I can tell you about. Other than that, we didn't have a clue because we lived in a house free of political views, literally free. Like whenever we go to school, we hear some kids like arguing. Maybe I am part of, like, my family is part of that, let's say, party, and the others would say, no, we're with that party. We weren't even interested in that kind of conversations. We were literally free from this kind of conversations. And even when we look at other families, like when I grew up, and even got married, and I've seen lots of people talk, even in workplaces, talking and arguing about lots of things, lots of political things. I wouldn't, let's say, engage in that conversation because I'm not really interested in those political arguments. The only thing that I know or that my family helped us understand is Palestine, the whole land, not just the West Bank, but the whole land from the river to the sea is Palestine. And the occupation, the Israeli occupation, took it from us. They literally took our land. As I said, we were from Al-Masmiyya, so we are originally supposed to be living in Al-Masmiyya, but the whole family, the whole Mhanna family, maybe this is something that maybe the listeners or everyone would not understand because it's rooted in Palestine more, that we love having kids and we have very big families. Just my family, my father's family, like my uncles and aunts and their cousins, we might be over 100 members. So just that. And believe that all of these families, and not only the Mhanna family were in Al Masmiyya, there are a lot of big families that were from Al Masmiyya that were forced to leave, to evacuate, literally evacuate. Like they took their keys, and I have my own, and they said that maybe a day or two we might go back. That's the only thing that we understood as kids and as adults right now. That's the most important part, rather than just going on to some kind of ridiculous kind of conversations I would see about what's going on, what's really happened from the 1948 until now.
Now we arrive at an integral part of womanhood for Noor. She takes us into the time that gave her coming of age its deepest significance: the proposals, the engagement, and the path to marriage.
As I grew up into womanhood, I was learning to teach, to live, how to endure, how to love. And just as I was beginning to understand the kind of woman I was becoming, I met someone who saw all of that in me as well, my future husband. It was what many might call an arranged marriage, but for me, it was never something forced or impersonal. It was a thoughtful, respectful process in the customs of our community and the values both of our families upheld. In Gaza, marriages begin with trust, reputation, and the involvement of family. The first step came through a message from someone I knew well, his sister, who had been my schoolmate and friend for years. Sent me a simple message. We're coming to your house to propose to you for my eldest brother, Khalid. At that time, I was 21 and in the final year of my BA in English language and teaching methods at Al-Azhar University. I had received several proposals before, but I had always turned them down. My education was my top priority, and I made a promise to myself to finish my degree before considering marriage. Still, when her message arrived, I did not say no. I simply told my parents about it and asked if they would be open to receiving them. Khalid's family wasn't unknown to us. In fact, they were really well respected and familiar. His father had been the headmaster of an honor roll school, and my father, a skilled locksmith, was often called to fix locks at the school. Over the years, they had built a friendly working relationship. There was already a sense of mutual respect and familiarity between our families, which made the idea feel a little bit safe. As is customary, the first visit was informal and women only. His mother and his sister came to our home, where my mother welcomed them warmly. We served them coffee and sweets, and I came out briefly to greet them. Maybe sat down for maybe like 15, 20 minutes. It wasn't a long visit. Greet them politely before returning to speak privately with my mother. They said something like, if you're open to letting the young man and woman to see each other, please let us know. This is how these things usually begin in Gaza: gentle, respectful, and always family centered. After they left, my father began asking around about the family in more detail. In our culture, community opinion matters deeply. People's reputations are shaped by how they treat others, how they raise their children, how they contribute to the society around them. Every word that came back to us was reassuring. Their family was known for their good manners, education, and strong values. A few days later, Khalid's mother called again to request a formal visit, this time with Khalid himself. My parents agreed. That visit was quiet but significant. He arrived with his parents, his sister, and after initial greetings, he and I were given some time to speak privately. We sat together on the balcony of our house, a space I loved for its view of the neighborhood. It was a calm, sincere conversation. We spoke about our lives, our values, our hopes, and there was no pressure, no pretending. Just two young people trying to understand if they could build a future together. To my surprise, we clicked. He listened closely when I said I wanted to finish my degree before moving forward with the marriage, and he respected that deeply. I saw kindness in his eyes and a gentle way of speaking that felt grounding. After they left, my parents asked me how I felt. I told them that I agreed. He had already told his family on the way home the same. The next day, they called my father to begin preparing the signing of the marriage contract. In Gaza, this marks the official beginning of the marriage. Even if the couple doesn't move in together immediately, it's kind of a serious commitment, rooted in both religious and cultural tradition. That same day, we had a small gathering, كتب we had a small gathering at Khal's family home. Both families came together. A week later, they visited us again. We hosted them with the same love and hospitality. Before the engagement, our family met to agree on the mahr, the dowry traditionally given by the groom to the bride. In our Islamic culture, the dowry is the bride's right, and she can ask for whatever she wishes, whether it's gold, a car, a house, or something else meaningful to her. In my case, it was set at 5,000 Jordanian dinars. My family hosted the engagement party and invited relatives and friends. My parents rented me a dress, and I remember going shopping and finding the one that I really, really loved. We prepared everything with care. My family brought the soft drinks, and Khalid's family arranged for the sweets, as is customary. After the celebration, we invited Khalid over for dinner, which is a traditional gesture. He was actually the one who drove me home from the engagement venue to my parents' house that evening. Over the next 6 months, we took time to really get to know each other. We went on dates, spent time at each other's homes, and shared meals with our families. Together, we also began preparing our future home. Khalid already had a small apartment on the ground floor of his parents' building. It had a large front yard, and before كتب الكتاب, the formal marriage contract, his family asked me if I felt comfortable living there. They even offered to help him find another apartment if I preferred. But I liked the place. It kind of felt like a fresh start. We went shopping together for furniture and household items, and he made sure that I had a say in every single detail. At that time, Khaled was working as a civil engineer at a respected company, and he was excited to build a life together, both literally and emotionally. Our wedding celebrations followed Palestinian tradition. A few days before the wedding, we held the henna party, a night especially for the bride, her family, and close female friends. It was one of my favorite parts of the whole celebration. My friends came over to my house and helped me get ready. We sang traditional songs, danced, and celebrated late into the night. My hands and feet were decorated with beautiful henna designs drawn carefully by a woman from our neighborhood. She made sure to include delicate floral patterns and my name in the palm of my hand, a symbol of the bond we were about to seal. The wedding day itself was filled with emotion and joy. It's customary in our culture for the groom to come to the bride's family home to officially take her to the wedding. That moment was unforgettable. My whole family, my parents, siblings, cousins, aunts, every single relative I know was there, gathered in the courtyard waiting. Khalid arrived with his entire family, relatives, cousins, family, like parents, everyone. A long line with a lot of relatives, as I said, accompanied by zafir, drums, singing, leading the way, dancing and chanting loudly as they reach our doorstep. Then, in a traditional gesture, Fadaous stepped forward and formally asked my father for my hand again, this time in front of everyone. I turned and I saw my mother trying to hold back her tears, my father gently nodding. His face was proud and emotional. It was the official moment I was leaving my family home, the place where I grew up, to start a new chapter. Just before Khalid and I walked into the wedding hall, he leaned towards me. He saw that I was nervous and whispered, "Don't be nervous. I've got you." It was a simple sentence, but it grounded me completely. In that moment, it didn't feel like we were walking in a hall full of people. It felt like we were quietly stepping into our life together, side by side. There was so much life in that room. People dancing, children running between the tables, the sounds of loved ones cheering for us. We cut the cake, we had our first dance, second dance, third dance, lots of dances. We received blessings and congratulations from relatives and friends. That night marked not just the beginning of our marriage, but weaving together of two families, two lives, and the dreams we had carried into that day. After the wedding, life settled into a gentle rhythm. We moved into our home in Gaza, just the two of us and all our dreams. I continued teaching, pouring my heart into my students, and Khaled worked along, committed like long hours as a civil engineer. But no matter how busy or tired we were, we always made time for each other. We loved going out together, simple dates that felt so special. Sometimes we'd go to a local, restaurant, trying something new or just enjoying our favorite dishes. Other times we'd walk along the seashore or pick up sweets and sit in the car with music playing, softly. Evenings were often spent with tea, stories, sharing memories from our childhood, talking about everything we hoped in for the future. Ours was a kind of, a partnership built on love, laughter, and ease. We supported each other without question, and even the ordinary days felt meaningful. There was always affection, always care in the smallest gestures. Life wasn't perfect, but it was real and full of joy, and we were building it together, moment by moment. A little over a year into our marriage, I found out I was pregnant. I told Khalid, and he literally was overjoyed. From that moment, we both knew things were about to shift. We were preparing to become a family. The pregnancy brought its ups and downs. I was a bit tired sometimes and sometimes overwhelmed. We managed together. He helped me like whatever he could. He made sure we had what we needed, reminded me to rest, and he tried to keep things light when I was feeling low. We talked a lot during those months about names, how we'd raise our child, what kind of future we hoped to build. When our son Naif was born, everything changed. Our time wasn't just ours anymore, it revolved around him. The house became kind of quiet in some ways and loud in others. We adjusted as parents do. We took turns waking up at night, split responsibilities, and learned to navigate that new rhythm together. Life became about routines, needs, and the everyday things that hold family together. We named our son Naif after Khalid's father. It was very important to us to honor family, especially the people who shaped who we are. Khalid had always spoken of his father with deep respect, and when he suggested the name, it just felt right. It was a name with a weight and dignity, and we hoped our son would grow into it and with strength and kindness. Choosing his name wasn't just a personal decision, it was a part of tradition that carries a lot of meaning in our culture. Once he was born, it didn't take long before everyone started saying how much he looked like his grandfather. It made the name feel even more fitting. A week after he was born, we held his Asbura, which is a week in Arabic. And it's not just a week, it's a celebration we have in our culture to welcome a new baby. Instead of having people come over, little by little to congratulate us, I wanted to make it special. So I planned a big gathering and chose a sweet blue baby elephant theme. It felt joyful and innocent, just like him. I invited everyone, my family, my relatives, Khalid's family and his relatives, and all the neighbors. We set everything up in the front yard of my house, or our house. I called the local company to decorate. It was covered in soft blue, white, and gray balloons and little elephant cutouts. It looked magical, like something out of dream. Khalid's mother prepared a table full of delicious food and drinks, traditional dishes, sweets, and juices. She poured so much love into every detail. That day, the house was full of laughter, music, and blessings. People came with an oath, which is money gifted to celebrate the birth of a child, as is customary. They also brought gifts for the baby, tiny clothes, blankets, toys. It felt like a mix between a baby shower and a welcome party, but done in our own way, deeply rooted in our traditions. It was one of those days I'll never forget. It was the first time I truly felt like Naif had been welcomed not just into our little family, but into something much bigger. From there, we learned how to live life as a family of three. Both of us were working, so we had to make arrangements for Naif's care. For a while, we put him in daycare, and when we couldn't, either my mom or Khalid's mom would step in to help. They both loved him dearly and were such a blessing during those early years. We always tried to share the responsibilities, feeding, changing bedtime routines. We cared for him together, learning as we went. Graduated as a civil engineer, faced the same heartbreaking reality so many young men in Gaza face: no stable work in their field. After trying and failing to find a long term position, he made a decision. He kind of asked me to about this decision. We made it together. It wasn't an easy one, but he decided to change careers entirely. His father had bought him a car in 2022, and Khalid started working as a taxi driver with a local company that operated much like Uber. It was flexible, safe, and held the same principles and values he cared about. More than anything, Khalid wanted to be the main provider for our family. That meant the world to him. I kind of continued to help wherever I could, first by working as a trainer, then as an English teacher at the American International School. As I said before, I love teaching. It gave me a sense of purpose and allowed me to contribute to our home while doing something that mattered. We had plans, so many of them. Plans for school, for holidays, for where he'd go to college, for my son's, where would he go to college someday. We talked about even moving into a bigger apartment once we felt more stable. And we dreamt of having more children, even though the challenges we held onto those ambitions. That's what kept us going. But raising a child in Gaza is never easy. Naif, as I said, he was born in 2019, and before he turned 5, he had already lived through two wars in 2021 and May 2023. During each aggression, we would shelter together, trying to make him feel safe, but there's no real safety in war. He was just a toddler, yet he would sleep with his hands over his ears, trying to block out the sounds of bombs. As his mother, it kind of shattered me. I couldn't protect him from the noise, from the fear, or the reality of what was happening around us. All I could do was hold him close and pray he would forget the sound of war. Then came the morning of October 7th, 2023.
In response to the events of October 7, Israel launches a bombardment of the Gaza Strip.
I woke up to the sounds of rockets. That's how October 7th started for me. No warnings, no sirens, just the shaking sound of explosions. It wasn't unusual to hear rockets in Gaza. We've lived through this before, but something about that morning felt different. It was early, maybe around 6 a.m., and the sky was still dim. I held my son tighter. He was still asleep, but I could feel the tension building in my chest. We didn't go to work that day. Everything had started so early, so suddenly, that there was no way anyone could carry on with their normal routine. My phone was lighting up with messages from family and friends, some already panicking, some trying to stay calm. I checked social media, and the videos I saw told me this wasn't a typical flare-up. Something massive was unfolding. Both Khalid and me were deeply concerned. He said, "Something big is coming." We ran upstairs to Khalid's parents' apartment and stayed with them for 3 days. The sounds of bombs echoed constantly. We could hear buildings being demolished nearby. We were literally terrified, trapped inside, scared even to go and buy the basic things we needed. Everything felt uncertain, and fear became part of every moment. During those 3 days, my son wouldn't leave my side, not for a second. We slept in a corridor of Khalid's parents' home, thinking it was the safest place, away from the windows. He clung to me the whole time. Even when he needed to go to the bathroom, he'd ask me to come with him. He was only 4, but he understood enough to be afraid. I could see it in his eyes, that fear children don't know how to put into words. Then came the day we were forced to evacuate to the south. At 5 a.m., while everyone was sleeping or trying to sleep, the Israeli occupation forces started calling families in northern Gaza, ordering them to evacuate immediately. The message was direct and threatening: evacuate or face destruction and death. We weren't given a choice, just a few hours to leave our homes, with a clear warning that staying behind meant putting our lives in danger. My husband refused to leave. He said, "This might take long. I need to provide for you and our son." I pleaded with him. I disagreed. I begged him to come with us. But he had already made up his choice, made up his mind. He said he would help people evacuate and at the same time earn something to keep us well fed. He told me to go with my family to my sister's apartment in Deir el-Balah in the south. And so I did. I said my goodbyes and I left with my son while he stayed behind to help others. They gave us only a couple of hours to evacuate, just a few hours to leave behind everything we have ever known. There was no time to think, only to move. I grabbed the small bag that I had kept bagged, for years, one that held the most important documents like birth certificates, IDs, and another bag with a few clothes for me and Naif. That was it. Thinking I was going, just it's gonna take 2 days and I'll be back. But deep down, there was fear. That was all we could take. Everything else, our furniture, our memories, our home that we tried to build, we left it all behind, not knowing if we would ever return. That's when I felt deep inside that this time was different, not like the escalations that we survived before. Still, I kept telling myself, it's just for a day or two. It's just for a day or two. Kind of, I don't know, lying to myself, but I was trying to keep myself calm during this, amidst all of what's going on. And before I end, I want to leave you with this. There is a common misconception about Gaza and its people, that we've always been the way the world sees us now, broken, displaced, desperate. But that's not who we are. We are human beings with rich lives and deep roots. We had homes full of love, streets full of laughter, schools full of dreams. We were never just the aftermath of war. No, we never were. What the world is seeing now is not our identity, it's what was done to us. Please remember that.
When Noor speaks about leaving her home, carrying her child, and making impossible choices, it's not abstract. She became the keeper of memory, love, and community. This is where we pause Noor's story for now. In part 2, she takes us deeper, into the moments when daily life in Gaza began to unravel. She remembers the sounds and silences that warned her everything was about to change. The Archive Speaks is produced by the Refugee Archive, a small team of women across the globe brought together through advocacy and intention. This is a community-rooted project. That means we need you, the listeners, to help shape what this becomes. If you want to support our cause, subscribe to our newsletter, The Refugee Archive, on Substack, because when more of us listen, more of them speak. Are you a refugee woman with a story to share? Are you an archivist, academic, or advocate with research to contribute? Get in touch and email us on substack.all.hands@gmail.com. You can learn more about the Archive Speaks and the Refugee Archive in the show notes.